Growing up in the neighborhood, you make choices. Now, everybody in the neighborhood is affiliated. Like, you can't be neutral.
At 56, the industry Ice Cube loved and cherished tried to break him. From raw street beginnings to global fame, his journey is marked by triumph, tension, and battles the public never saw. Behind the anthems, the films, and the fearless image lies a man shaped by hard choices and quiet sacrifices. But what did the success truly cost him? And who was he forced to become to survive this industry that lacks loyalty? Join us as we uncover the mysteries surrounding the tragedies that melted Ice Cube. Death of self. Ice Cube, who once set the world on fire with his voice, eventually had his own fire extinguished with force. Once a star in the spotlight, he found himself betrayed and banned from broadcasting, with multi-million-dollar contracts disappearing overnight. To the public, this sudden disappearance looked like a retirement in silence, a legend stepping back from the limelight. But in reality, he was going through the most painful days of his life, a fight against time itself and against an industry that didn't like how he handled his fight with the passage of time. Mr. O'Shea Jackson, aka Ice Cube, built his career on offering lyrical commentary on the things he found displeasant about the communities around him. Along the lines, he had to learn a new language, restraint. The culture warrior of South Central was compelled to become a shadow of the figure who once shook the foundations of the musical world. He was a man who basically fought for the Compton youth's ability to have an independent mind, enabling them to not just accept what was thrown at their faces. As time ticked, the world no longer actively lent out ears to the unfiltered tongue of revolutionaries. Instead, they went in search of softer, more modernized voices. His lyrics, once a weapon against injustice, were put behind bars of age. After all, the injustice that he preached against was going off bit by bit with the times. The raw, rugged persona that defined him was buried, and in its place, a calmer figure was emerging. This assassination of self, however, coincided with a personal evolution. The ice-cold rebel was being reborn within the walls of his own home. This transformation raises a crucial question. What force could be powerful enough to tame the world's most dangerous rapper? Or rather, what could be the main driving force behind the sudden change? Fire meant to warm flesh and blood. As Ice Cube grew older, he still had the potential to continue in the limelight, but it wasn't to happen. There was another path which he aimed to follow. This new flame that burned was not like the inferno of rebellion that lit his early career. Instead, it was the warm, steady hearth of a family man. This fire was no longer needed to rage against the world. Its purpose had to be shifted to keeping the roof over his family's head warm. After marrying Kimberly Woodruff in 1992, the man who was once the fiery mouthpiece for a revolution found a new cause. He went on to have 4 children, and with them came a change in his perspective and his art. The hard edges of his music began to soften, not from compromise, but from a newfound sense of responsibility. When asked about this shift, Cube would explain how he is a husband now, how his entry into fatherhood has led him to discover a new purpose for this next stage, and how he is a man who would always try to do the right thing. Along the line, he developed a realization that his fans were growing up with him, and they had kids of their own. This led to a conscious decision to create new entertainment that the whole family could appreciate, a bright-colored contrast to the explicit reality of his NWA days. It would see him not only toning down the voice of his music, but also toning down music as a whole. This transformation was not without its critics. In a much later interview, he described how some relabeled him, claiming he went from Ice Cube to Nice Cube, trading his street credibility for posh office success. But for Cube, the move was authentic. In the past, he wrote music to shake the world. Now, he writes music to keep his own world from falling apart. In the eyes of the fans, Cube remained a fierce rapper who just wasn't releasing music as much anymore. But behind the spotlight was a man hiding his anger like an ugly scar under his shirt. He still stepped onto the stage and still heard the instruments playing and the fans cheering. He just chose not to put out his grievances. A different question echoed in his mind. If he told everything to the world, if he attacked the system, exposing the way they were, the way he wanted, would this affect his family? Would his child be hurt?
Man, when I saw it, this has never went through my head with another person in life. But when I saw her,
he was no longer just a warrior for the streets, but a guardian for his family, perhaps just out of fatherly love, or perhaps something more deep and gruesome. Was he speaking from a place of trauma? Compton, home of bonfires. To understand the fire that fueled Ice Cube, it's important to look into the world that forged him. During the 1970s and 80s, South Central Los Angeles was worlds away from the Hollywood image of the American dream. For many, it was a nightmare in a fancy suit. This was a place where survival was a daily struggle and hope was a scarce commodity. It was a famous area, but for all the wrong reasons. Racism in South Central was structural. It lived in segregated housing, hostile policing, neglected schools, and a justice system that treated black lives as disposable. The streets laced with angry black youths were all looked down on by those whites in fenced apartments. The neighborhood was a landscape of crushing poverty and widespread addiction. It was a place where an area of just 10 square meters was enough to hold 50 million addicts, a superficial statement to show the sheer magnitude of degeneracy in the streets. Contrary to public opinion at the time, the poverty wasn't even the worst thing. The ever-present threat of violence was the truly scary part. A simple glance at the wrong person or the use of an ill-chosen word could mean that right there could be the end of your life. This was a land where children learned not to wander aimlessly and speak freely. In this environment, dreams were a luxury few could afford. Who could teach a child about the future when all they could focus on was surviving every afternoon after school in the present? For the young O'Shea Jackson, born in 1969, this was the grim reality. Fear was a silent, suffocating presence in every breath, a lesson learned through observation. For the much older O'Shea Jackson, he didn't want his kids to grow up in the asylum he was raised in. To navigate this world, a boy had to learn the rules of invisibility. Cube learned to bow his head, walk quickly, and pretend he wasn't there. In South Central, the wrong look could be costly. This constant pressure, this need to suppress every natural impulse, created a simmering rage beneath the surface. He was forced to keep quiet because he understood that words were useless in a place where people preferred to use their fists. This oppressive silence, this bottled-up fury against a system that seemed designed to crush him, would not be contained forever. This neighborhood played a huge part in the making of the unbothered character Ice Cube is now known for. That, along with the key roles his parents played in making sure what their two kids saw wasn't just bloodshed. Travels up the valley. Ice Cube's parents, Hosea Jackson and Doris Benjamin, raised him and his two other siblings in a working-class household on Van Wyck Street in the Westmont section of South Los Angeles. Despite the volatile environment, they were said to have tried their best in order to shield the eyes of their children from what was happening outside. His father, Hosea, worked as a machinist and a groundskeeper at UCLA, while his mother worked as a hospital clerk and custodian. Together, they had a very telling effect on his success. He noted, that they instilled in him the values of hard work and education, which he needed to become who he later went on to be. His mother notably insisted he complete a drafting degree at the Phoenix Institute of Technology, labeling it as a backup plan before he fully committed to his music career. Later on in 1987, via her urging, he moved to Arizona to attend the Phoenix Institute of Technology. He graduated in 1988 with a degree in architectural drafting. Only after completing his degree did he return to Los Angeles to rejoin NWA full-time and record the landmark album Straight Outta Compton. His father had a strong presence. He balanced disciplined work ethic with a protectiveness that helped his sons see him as a hero and a light toward the kind of man they wanted to be, not like the ones littered on the streets outside. His consistent employment provided a rare level of economic stability in South Central Los Angeles, which Ice Cube has credited for keeping him focused and out of trouble. While Ice Cube's mother mainly focused on academic milestones, Hosea instilled a certain sense of personal discipline and self-respect, both aspects acting as shields for their children. They both employed various joint strategies for protection. Excluding the employment levels which they maintained, they ensured that they put Ice Cube far away from the daily influence of local gang recruitment. This joint decision saw them make him travel from their neighborhood to over 40 miles away to attend William Howard Taft High School in the suburban Woodland Hills. They frowned at the thought of him lazying around in any way towards education, a necessary action that led to his personal growth. Even though he didn't later make use of the degree, his learnedness granted him the proper exposure to see above the ruckus in his surroundings. They encouraged his participation in sports and focused his social life dynamics on their specific block, Van Wyck Street, which was also known as Sport Street, where sporting activities were in focus, discouraging his participation in the idleness elsewhere and where neighbors looked out for each other to keep gangs at bay. This culture of athleticism and recreational neighborhood competition fit O'Shea like a glove. He was in love with basketball and football, which was a main practice on their block. He himself later came out to note in interviews that he used to be a very athletic kid and played for his high school football team as an outside linebacker and fullback.
You know, he thought I was trying to be like Fonzie or somebody, you know what I mean? So he started calling me Ice Cube.
Ice Cube had two other siblings, an older brother and a younger sister. By the time he went through all this telling development, his older brother was already a grown man doing his own thing in the roughed-up neighborhoods. Clyde Jackson was 9 years older and gifted the name Ice Cube to O'Shea after he would repeatedly try to hit on his girlfriends over the phone. In an act of extra harsh sibling revenge, Clyde would try to slam O'Shea into the freezer till he became an Ice Cube. O'Shea embraced this name as a sort of badge of honor, and it stuck since. With his vision clearer than those around him, he saw it. He saw the bottom barrel behavior happening outside more clearly than anyone, and he was desperate, like his parents, to see it end. It was from the ashes of this burning desperation that a voice would finally emerge, a voice that would find its weapon in rhythm and rhyme, a voice not just for himself, but for all who fought in Compton. Shazam for Antarctica. The crushing silence he practiced in South Central Los Angeles was never meant to hold forever. For a young Ice Cube, endurance was not a choice, but a condition of survival.
Heighten everybody's awareness that this problem has been going on since before.
Amidst the staggering atmosphere around him, he still aimed to balance those portions of his life he held dear. However, that balance shattered without warning when one of the people he cared about died. Cube's sister, the family's pride, was caught in a senseless street brawl and killed. She had done nothing wrong. She was just simply present when anger needed an outlet. It was the kind of death that felt especially cruel because it carried no meaning, no lessons, just loss. When the police arrived, they didn't see the daughter or sister whom Jackson O'Shea adored. They just saw another black victim, another report to file, another statistic to close ASAP so they could get back to donuts and coffee. Cube watched the hearse disappear down the street. He heard his mother cry uncontrollably. He saw his father, a man who had spent his life bowing his head just to survive, collapse at the doorstep, emptied of strength. In that moment, Cube understood a hard truth. Silence did not protect you. Good behavior did not save you. The world could still reach into your very protected life and break everything. That night, something inside him broke open. Along those lines, after the tragedy, alone in his dark room, he picked up a pen and began writing with intent. Somewhere in that room, O'Shea Jackson began to morph, and Ice Cube began to form. The notebook became his first weapon. Weeks later at school, a classmate found one of his rhyme books and read the lyrics aloud for everyone to listen in the schoolyard. Cube, after numerous failed attempts to steal this, now braced for laughter and prejudice. Instead of mockery, they gave a listening ear to his work. In their faces and words, he saw his own feelings reflected back at him. As he later understood, the words had said what many felt but couldn't articulate. His voice, he realized, could carry others. His voice, he realized, could carry whatever he wished it to carry. After that incident, he began reshaping this anger, bit by bit, into rhythm, transforming the pain into a structure that could leave an impact. With his first group, CIA, Cube learned how to compress lived experience into lines that struck hard and sent messages across. Hip-hop, which made people bop heads, stopped being just entertainment. It became a tool to cut through. That blade found its sharpest edge when Cube joined forces with Dr. Dre and Eazy-E to form NWA. The fire that had smoldered in a South Central bedroom was about to become an inferno. In 1988, Straight Outta Compton erupted like a football stadium after a late winning goal. It wasn't an album chasing awards and approval. It was documentation. Cube, as the group's primary writer, didn't romanticize anything. There were no party anthems, no escape fantasies. NWA delivered unfiltered accounts of the police brutality, systemic neglect, paranoia, and survival experienced in communities. The impact was immediate. For a generation suppressed into silence, Ice Cube's music was a way out into the open. His defiant lyrics transformed their frustrations into a powerful anthem. For the first time, they felt not just heard, but seen and empowered, their harsh reality finally given a global voice. This music wasn't just for Compton anymore. As it grew, it started stepping into the mainstream network. Communities facing similar challenges embraced it. For the first time, young Black Americans heard their lives reflected without sugarcoating. None of their feelings was underexpressed. The establishment recoiled. Media outlets labeled NWA a threat. Politicians panicked. The FBI issued a formal warning letter condemning the group's lyrics, but every attempt to silence them only amplified the message. The backlash proved their point. The system's fear exposed its fragility. The quiet terror instilled in Cube as a child was now reflected in the nation, and this time, the nation trembled. Ice Cube's transformation was complete, but surviving the streets and reshaping hip-hop was only the beginning. His life was a creative cycle. To fully grasp the eventual fade-out of his musical being, you would need to see the first instance Cube's voice left the mic behind to find a costume, this time on the silver screen, where the battles were different, but the stakes remained just as high. Graduating from lyrics to scripts. Before he entered into cinema, the death of his music career was on the cards. Just as the flames of NWA burned brightest, the group began to fracture from within. The very success they had fought for.
He's our temperament in NWA. He's our conscience. He keeps us on track.
Became a catalyst for their undoing. Cracks appeared over money, power, and reputation. Questions on jealousy of who was more deserving and who truly controlled the group's destiny created a battleground where everything turned into heated confrontations. For Ice Cube, the soul and founder of NWA, the music was a weapon for truth for himself and the public. This way, a heartbreaking moment meant he had to step in or out urgently. When he felt that the art was becoming tainted by greed and subsequent disputes, he faced a choice: peace and stepping away from the selfish accusations and banned altogether, or self-defense and fighting for his integrity as the leader and putting the allegations from the other members to bed. In the end, he chose to defend the integrity of his voice and walk away. In 1989, the one who ignited the fire quietly departed, leaving the biggest group in the world at the absolute peak of its power to fall. He didn't fade away. He jumped off. A year later, in the 1990s, he released his debut solo album, America's Most Wanted. It was a raw, unfiltered declaration of war, proving that the fire was his to command. The album's success was monumental, cementing his status not just as a member of a revolutionary group, but as a revolutionary artist in his own right. He had proven his voice could stand alone, louder and fiercer than ever. It was this potent, undeniable presence that caught the eye of a young filmmaker named John Singleton. Cinema came calling, not as an escape from the hectic ups and downs that came with being a solo artist, but as a new stage. His role as Doughboy in the 1991 film Boys in the Hood was not a career change. It was a change of medium. He was no longer just the truth-telling rapper. He was now an actor, using this new persona to recount the same stories of struggle and survival. He acted as if he was still rapping, but with his body instead of his throat, conveying a lifetime of pain, anger, and wisdom in rugged files of movement. This new chapter allowed him to tell his stories differently. He could now use the subtle language of film, reaching a global audience that might never have listened to a gangsta rap album. He transitioned from the ruggedness of Boys in the Hood to create cultural touchstones like Friday and the Barbershop series. These films were not a betrayal of his roots, but an expansion of them, showcasing how it actually happened, the humor, community, and everyday humanity that existed alongside the violence. A calmer approach that favored the family man he was so interested in becoming. Each role became another chapter in the storybook of the world he knew, told through characters that were reflections of the people he grew up with. Away from the music, and decades later the world moved on, and mainstream attention shifted, but Cube's influence never faded. It was still there. Though quieter in the spotlight, his impact on hip-hop runs deeply, a silent force shaping voices, aesthetics, and the very hip culture he helped ignite. Fingerprints, traveling through wormholes. Ice Cube's true legacy is not just carved into gold records or measured by box office totals.
We started off trying to professionalize 3-on-3, but then we realized we had invented a whole new sport.
It lives in the doors he forced open and never closed behind him. He helped build a world where artists could speak without permission, where anger could be articulated instead of punished. In that sense, he helped shape a space where Black voices could exist freely. That world now moves so effortlessly that it sometimes forgets who broke the lock. Younger generations raise their voices across TikTok, YouTube, and countless digital stages, speaking on freedom, justice, and identity with little fear of consequence. It feels modern, effortless even, but that freedom was not gifted. It was fought for, inch by inch. These artists walk a path already cleared, their footprints layered over the man whose feet forced grass off the soil. Ice Cube's impact, though no longer always at the forefront of visibility, is permanent, woven into the cultural bloodstream. He took the hyperlocal rage of Compton and translated it into a global emotion. He turned street music into testimony, transforming anger into articulation and pain into power. He did not simply write songs. He gave voice to millions who had never been heard. Stories of police brutality, systemic neglect, and survival under pressure finally found expression. When he spoke, people recognized themselves. They heard what they had lived, even if they had never known how to say it. That revolutionary spirit refused to stay confined to instruments. When Cube stepped into the cinema, he shattered expectations once again. He was not a rapper chasing relevance in Hollywood. He was a storyteller expanding his canvas. He proved that a man from South Central could not only star in films, but also write, produce, and shape them. Movies like Friday and Barbershop were more than entertainment. They were cultural spaces, reflections of communities rarely allowed warmth, humor, or complexity on the big screen. In building those worlds, Cube opened yet another door, showing that artists from weird margins could become architects of their own narratives. Every revolution does carry a paradox. When a flame burns bright enough to light the way, the torchbearer often disappears in its glow. In a world now saturated with voices, the original voice can seem distant. The fierce, uncompromising figure of the 1990s gradually gave way to a more reflective man. Those who were used to watching his rage were left confused. They missed the Ice Cube who burned everything down. They mistook his want for peace for cowardice and retreat. What they did not see were the battles that no longer belonged on a stage. The understanding that words once used as weapons could now wound those closest to him. Ice Cube understands what many never do. Staying loud forever can cost you everything. Knowing when to step back and when to protect what matters is its own form of courage. The boy from South Central, who was once forced into silence, taught the world how to speak. He cracked the system open, handed others the microphone, and watched them run forward. And when everyone finally found their voice, he claimed the rarest triumph of all, the freedom to be quiet. The fire never went out. It simply learned how to burn without destroying what it loves. The doors he opened are now passed through without a second glance. The world no longer needs shouting because everyone has a microphone, everyone has a platform, and everyone has a way to tell their story. But none of this would exist without the man who took the first blow. His fingerprints, though worn with time, remained foundational on everything he touched. Do you think Ice Cube's evolution from a revolutionary rapper to a family man was necessary? And was it something you would have done? Has he earned the right to silence? Or should a voice that powerful always be shouting? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.